Hello, and welcome to Conversations on 90.3 FM, WHPC. I'm your host, Ray Bertolino, and it's my guest today. He's a good friend and a frequent guest on Conversations, the great Mr. Ellis Henican from Newsday and the Fox News Channel. Ellis is the co-author with NASCAR racing champ Michael Waltrip of a really terrific new book. It's just out this week called In the Blink of an Eye, Dale, Daytona, and the Day That Changed Everything. I really enjoyed the book. I have to confess I didn't know a whole lot about the world of professional stock car racing, but I learned a lot about the sport in the book. And even if you're not a NASCAR fan, the book deals with a lot of universal human themes of family and friendship, winning and losing, triumph and tragedy, keeping the faith when things seem hopeless. It's just a great book, a well-told story, very inspiring, and I highly recommend it. So, Ellis Henican, welcome as always. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ray. I'm shocked. I would have thought you were a total gearhead NASCAR fan, man.
I will. As a kid on Long Island, we don't really have racing much on Long Island.
I know.
Big, and I think Long Island was one of the centers. Over 100 years ago, they had the Vanderbilt Cup races. I think that's why we have the Vanderbilt Motor Parkway on Long Island.
Well, you and me both. I grew up in the South, and I guess I should have known a lot about NASCAR. But in New Orleans, NASCAR not a huge deal. Of course, it is the largest spectator sport in all of America. So there are a lot of people out there who are very into it, but you're right, and part of the thing about the book really is that I think it's a great story for people who are not total obsessive race car fans, as frankly I wasn't. Although I have to say, working on the book this past year, I got kind of sucked into it a little bit.
Yeah, me too. I haven't really followed the sport, but Daytona's coming up. Daytona 500 is coming up in a few weeks, and if somebody said, "Hey, you want to come down?" I'd be there.
Yeah, no, that's the Super Bowl. It's interesting. For those who don't know, the seminal event in modern NASCAR history is the death of Dale Earnhardt, who was a beloved, sort of complicated but hugely talented driver, who all the fans thought could never die, would never get in a crash that killed him. And almost exactly 10 years ago this month at the Daytona 500, something very big happened, and told in this book by a guy who is, I think, uniquely situated along with me to tell it. His name is Michael Waltrip, and Waltrip was a driver and was really Dale's best friend. And Michael had been on a very bad losing streak. He had lost
462 races, right?
462 races in a row. I don't think anywhere in the history of sports is there anyone who's had quite that persistent grab at defeat.
I mean, he had respectable finishes, but he just never got the cup. Never got the
good
win.
Driver, beloved by the fans, a great character, funny, kind of real country boy from Kentucky, he had an older brother named Darrell, who was a very successful driver.
Well, that whole thing. His brother was, I think, Darrell. I'm certainly familiar with the name Darrell Waltrip, as I am with Richard Petty, Cale Yarborough, Mario Andretti. But he was 16 years older, Darrell, and I think sort of dominated NASCAR back in the 80s.
A big shadow on little brother Michael. But Dale kept telling his friend Mikey, he said, "Listen, Mikey, if you drive on my team," he said, "you'd win." He said, we get you to win." And so eventually, Waltrip agrees to join Dale Earnhardt Racing, which is the team that the great man presided over. And their very first race together is 10 years ago, literally this month, in the Daytona 500. And on that day, Ray, Waltrip wins, breaking this terrible losing streak. Dale Jr. comes in second, and in the final lap of the race, running third, Dale Earnhardt smashes into the wall and is killed. And so it is truly a day of, you use the term triumph and tragedy. I think that's exactly right. It was the greatest day of Michael's life and the worst day of his life. I
can't imagine the feeling of exhilaration, the thrill of winning at long last, and the guy that was your mentor.
Exactly.
And close buddy. Dale Earnhardt, spoke with Michael before the race about strategy, right, and how they would he and Dale's son Dale Jr. Would maneuver on the track sort of as a team, which was sort of different from the usual.
That is right. It was a way of thinking about a race and having drivers actually be of help to each other. And in fact, when Dale hits the wall, he at that moment is blocking other cars from moving up on top of Mike and Dale Jr. And so in a funny way, he almost gave his life for it. But Michael has never talked about this in any detail in the last 10 years. And frankly, it kind of messed him up in some ways. It was some of the fans blamed him, and he didn't really know how to feel or what to say. And all these years later, he is finally has unveiled his own feelings about it, and this month on the 20th of February, he is racing again in Daytona. Michael will be there in a black car.
I read in the paper.
Right,
and it's going to be the same number, right? The number
exactly.
15 and Napa.
Ray, you know more about this than you're letting on.
Well, I got into it. I really did. As a matter of fact, since reading the book last week, I've never watched it before, but. The Speed channel, Speed TV.
Sure.
I've been getting into that. I really have. It's it's an exciting sport.
Well, do you think we might be creating a NASCAR fan base in Long Island here?
I hope so. Well, a lot of people are Essie Cup, who's been on the show a couple of times. I think she's Essie's
a buddy of mine, and is a big NASCAR fan.
Right.
I think she likes the drivers, actually.
Well, they really are sort of sex symbols, right? They're like rock stars. They really are. They're groupies.
It's interesting when you and I spent a bunch of time with Waltrip working on the book, and when we were in New York together, he walks down the street, and a few people come over and say hello, but it's when we're in Charlotte or in Atlanta or in somewhere in Florida, it is truly like Elvis has come to town. I mean, it's just an amazing connection that these drivers, and Michael especially, because he is such a beloved figure in the sport, the connection that they have with their fans, unlike anything you will see in professional athletics and in basketball or football. They really feel like it's their responsibility to have relationships with the people who, frankly, support them.
Well, I think he had been voted a couple of times, most popular, one of the most popular racers in NASCAR. But this tragic event 10 years ago at Daytona, where he won the race, Michael Waltrip, did that affect his popularity?
Well, it made him, I would say, a source of more controversy. I think the fact that in the years since he stuck it out and he didn't give up and he keeps going and he's won some more races, I think that has healed some of those wounds. But frankly, finally being willing to open up and tell this story is, I think, the undone piece of that process. And with this book, he's doing this. And as I say, it's a great story on a human level, and it also takes somebody like me, who'd started out not as a great expert on the topic, but tells it and draws you in a way that, now I'm like you. I'm all of a sudden interested in the thing and cared about it and getting to know the characters and feeling like, my life as a writer and as a guy and as a fan has been, frankly, kind of enriched by the process.